2020. This meeting will be slightly different than the previous ones that we've been doing over Zoom. At least public comment will be handled in a different way. You can still submit, I believe, an email comment, which starts as soon as the meeting is begun and lasts until the item is presented. And at each time, are we still going to do the 3 minutes, Rebecca? No? Okay, great. So you can still submit an email comment, but we're also have updated the system to allow for speaking comments as well. So you can join onto the meeting. You can find that link at www.sonomacity.org. Rachel Hundley and myself have also, and I think some other council members have posted links on their Facebook for this, so you can find that there as well. And you can attend the meeting as an attendee. So there's going to be panelists in the meeting, and those will be people who have a little bit more control over mics and being able to speak, and attendees. When you want to make a comment, please raise your hand. You can do so by clicking the raise hand button. I believe you click participants and then raise hands. At least that's how it works for me. Rebecca, is it different for an attendee?
They raise their hand and then we unmute them, and then we, their video won't show, it'll show their name or and their box, and you'll hear them. But because of the webinar setting, it doesn't show their video.
Great. Okay, so it won't show the video, but it'll show your name. And when I'm saying raise your hand, don't do it physically like this. You're going to need to go ahead and click on the button. I've seen a lot of people try to do it physically. It doesn't quite work that way. We got to see it, and then you'll be recognized by our city clerk, Rebecca Barr, and you'll be unmuted and allowed to speak. So I think it's a little bit better way for people to be able to make public comment. And I thank city staff for doing such a good job putting this together. And there is a risk, of course, by letting people into the meeting that we get Zoom bombed. This has been happening at a variety of different council meetings and public meetings throughout the country. In the event that that does happen, we will shut down the stream and attempt to restart it. If it is able to restart, we will be picking up right where we left off. No discussion will be happening in the interim. And if we are unable to restart, then the stream will be completed. The meeting will be considered adjourned at the place where it was adjourned. No additional votes. We'll have to bring those items back. In addition, be aware that everybody is doing this from their own home. You are invited into my living room at the moment, and at various places at other people's homes. And so I think it's important to remember that you are in our personal spaces, and we have reserved the right to turn off the camera if we'd like to, but we will continue to listen. If anybody leaves the chat, turns off the camera and leaves, they will inform the city clerk or myself, and it will be noted into the record. And with that, I'd like to have the flag.
Mayor Harvey.
Yep.
Sorry, just one other thing. Can you also just communicate to the public if they've called in, how they raise their hand, or the city clerk can do that?
Yeah, the city clerk could do that. That would be great.
I believe it's in the instructions. It's *9 from your smartphone, or from, and I'm sorry, I know there's a way you do it from a not smartphone as well. Let me look at it quickly. I believe it is also *9, but let me check on that, and can I get back to you in just a minute on that one?
That'd be great.
Could we do a little reminder when we have our first public comment? Like
Yeah.
Read things.
Good idea. All right. Good. All right. Well, if we could bring up the flag and do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic
For which
it stands,
one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Can we have a roll call?
Yes. Vice Mayor Hundley?
Here.
Councilmember Harrington?
Here.
Councilmember Agrimonti? Councilmember Cook?
Here.
And Mayor Harvey?
Present. Thank you all
Thank
for
you.
being here. Go ahead and report on closed session. There was no closed session. Any changes to the agenda? Do we have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call vote. Can't hear you.
I'm gonna assume she said me. Aye.
Councilmember Harrington,
Aye.
Councilmember Agrimonti, Member Cook,
Aye.
Mayor Harvey.
Yes. Great.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to public comment. At this time, members of the public may comment on any item not appearing on the agenda. It is recommended that you keep your comments under 3 minutes or less under the state law, unless otherwise permitted under the Ralph M. Brown Act. The merits of this matter presented under this item cannot be discussed or acted upon by the City Council at this time. For items appearing on the agenda, the public will be invited to make comments at the time the item comes up for council consideration. Please raise your virtual hand. I see Matt's already got it up. Well done, Matt. And you'll be unmuted to the city clerk when it's your time. And if you are on the phone, please press, what is it, *9? And that will be the equivalent of raising your virtual hand. So I will note this public comment period open. And if the
Mayor Harvey.
Yes.
Mayor Harvey, just a and if you hit the raise hand feature, you don't have to do *9. It's on a regular phone that you hit *9 to raise your hand virtually.
Okay, great. Good. So if it pleases the city clerk, go ahead and call on anybody who would like to join. I'm seeing Matt Metzler.
Yes. We'll see.
And it looks like he is unmuted.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
So can I start talking now?
You may.
Okay. Thank you, council members and city staff for making this meeting accessible on Zoom. I want to thank the city of Sonoma for getting the 4 new electric vehicle charging stations installed in the Bank of America parking lot. This will do a lot to help Sonoma transition to transportation infrastructure free of dependence on fossil fuels. So kudos to the city council and city staff for making this happen. But I want to talk about getting around Sonoma without driving. Although I drive a car when necessary for over 30 years, I've gotten around Sonoma mostly by bicycle. The recent letters to the editor and many of the comments submitted to this survey about restriping Broadway were written by people who've never bicycled around Sonoma. They make me feel like a second-class citizen when it comes to my choice of vehicle. Many don't realize that when Broadway pavement work was done years ago, only the center traffic lanes were repaved, but the bike and parking lanes were not. Therefore, the pavement to the right of the white line at the edge of the traffic lane is very rough, and that's why you don't often see bicyclists on Broadway. Frankly, I'm offended when folks say that bicyclists shouldn't be on busy streets like Broadway. I think those who do not bicycle should not decide where bicyclists should ride. Our tax dollars should be spent on roads for people, not just for cars. We wouldn't have so much traffic if everyone who is coming close enough to the plaza to do so would walk or bicycle instead of driving. We need better bike lanes to make this happen. I'm also disappointed with my fellow bicyclist, Councilmember Harrington. She and others suggest that 1st Street West and 2nd Street East are better routes for bicycling than Broadway. I've bicycled on 1st Street West, south of West Napa Street, and I feel unsafe there because it is a narrow residential street, congested with parked cars and folks pulling in and out without watching for bicycles. I live just west of Broadway, so getting to 2nd Street East is 2 blocks out of my way in each direction. For these reasons, and because there are fewer stop signs, I often bicycle on Broadway. City Council's decisions about how to design our streets should be made based more on their best judgment about preventing climate change than on an unscientific online survey. Those of us who choose to bicycle or walk instead of drive should be supported since our transportation choice does not result in greenhouse gas emissions, unlike driving a car. And thank you again for making this accessible on Zoom.
Sorry, having to find the right window here. I don't see any other raised hands. Mayor Harvey, but I know that there was some email public comment. You're muted.
Are we reading that?
It was received after the time when you opened public comment. So I believe is it for general public comment, Tanya?
Yes.
Okay. Well, so are we kind of doing both methods? I'm seeing Kathy kind of nod yes.
That's what my understanding was.
Yeah, it's a pleasure of the council. We were trying to move virtual, but again, people may not have understood the transition here, and I think we should take all public
Let's
comment we
read it into the
receive
record.
and read what we have.
Thank you.
Okay. This is from Tom Conlin. Esteemed council members, we are writing to express our deep disappointment with the City Council's decision not to adopt staff's creative, no-cost plan to upgrade our city's gateway for the 21st century. We support the design alternative closest to Caltrans' own recommendation for 2015 for a 3-lane option. Maintain current ample levels of parking, replace 2 unneeded car lanes with protected bike lanes along the full length of Broadway, and upgrade landscaping. A 3-lane option for Broadway is the only option that is consistent with the city's own 2016 circulation element of the general plan, which recommends a reduction from 5 lanes to 3. Goals of a 3-lane option include: 1, improve the safety and accessibility of city streets to all types of users, drivers, bicyclists, pedestrians, transit riders, and those with disabilities. 2, reduce the city's exposure to liability. 3, reduce traffic congestion. 4, reduce vehicle travel speeds, traffic calming. 5, support a vibrant entrepreneurial economy. 6, preserve the city's unique historic and cultural character. And 7, reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Finally, at the City Council's March 2nd workshop on Broadway restriping options, the consulting traffic engineer also identified a 3-lane option for Broadway as the best service option. Sorry, I'm not finished. I have to scroll down here. We have long supported the city's efforts to make our public roads safely accessible to all residents and visitors, not just those in cars. Sonoma is a small, compact city where 79% of our trips are less than 5 miles long. This gives us the shortest average trip length anywhere in the county, where 60% of all trips are under 5 miles. What's more, our town is flat and temperate, with our consultants confirmed makes Sonoma ideal for cycling and walking. Despite these natural advantages, currently less than 2% of all trips are made by bike and only 6% on foot. This is far less than many cities with we compete for visitors. Why? Because Broadway was last redesigned in 1956, and we still lack the public infrastructure that encourages walking and biking. Children and most adults don't feel safe biking on roads with cars whizzing by. Their drivers increasingly distracted by cell phones. Unprotected bike lanes are better than no bike lanes, but even these feel unsafe with cars speeding down Highway 12. It is clear that cities that invest in adequate cycling infrastructure have higher rates of cycling and many fewer fatalities. In Sonoma, we have a chicken and egg situation. No one wants to improve the cycling infrastructure because not many people cycle, but not many people cycle because we lack adequate infrastructure. Cycling infrastructure also improves pedestrian safety. When cyclists are unsafe, they move to sidewalks.
About 3 minutes?
That was.
Okay. Thank you very much, LaTanya. All right. Any other public comment? Not seeing anybody raise their hand. We have no other letters submitted. Okay. Great. All right. On to meeting dedications. Do we have any meeting dedications?
None for me.
None. All right. On to consent calendar. All items listed under the consent calendar are considered to be routine, will be acted upon by a single motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless members of council, staff, or public request specific items to be removed for separate action. At this time, council may decide to change the order of the agenda. Any decisions on changing? Anybody want to poll? Any members of public looking to poll? Seeing none, I'll bring it out for public comment on the consent calendar. Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the council. And if we could go ahead and have a roll call vote or a motion on the consent calendar.
Move to
Motion
approve.
to approve the, go ahead,
Second.
Madam.
Hear you, Rachel.
Okay, motion to approve.
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Agrimonti. Rebecca Barr.
Vice Mayor Hundley,
Aye.
Councilmember Harrington,
Aye.
Councilmember Agrimonti,
Aye.
Councilmember Cook,
Aye.
Mayor Harvey.
Yes,
Thank you. The motion carries unanimously.
great. On to item 5.1, consider and possibly introduce and adopt an urgency ordinance adopting the urgency ordinance of the Board of Supervisors of the County of Sonoma, the Board of Commissioners of the Sonoma County Community Development Commission, establishing an affirmative defense to eviction arising from income loss or substantial medical expense related to COVID-19. City Attorney Jeff Walter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. At the last council meeting, the council directed our office to develop an ordinance that essentially mirrors or references the county's current residential eviction moratorium ordinance, as well as go forward and create some protections for tenants who are commercial tenants who may be facing eviction because of COVID-19 reasons. And before you tonight is such an ordinance. It incorporates and adopts by reference the county's ordinance, amends some of the provisions of the county's ordinance, as well as creates protections for commercial tenants who are facing eviction due to COVID-19 reasons. Specifically, the ordinance adopts specific sections of the county ordinance and then moves on and creates a commercial eviction moratorium. Section 4 of the ordinance essentially is a residential eviction moratorium modeled after the county of Sonoma's ordinance that was adopted a number of weeks ago. And Section 5 of the urgency ordinance before you creates a commercial eviction moratorium. I'd like to address just briefly the commercial eviction ordinance. It specifies that commercial evictions cannot occur if they are due to the non-payment of rent, and the non-payment of rent is caused by COVID-19 reasons, specifically a reduction of 20% or more of a commercial tenant's monthly gross receipts compared to the average monthly gross receipts of the commercial tenant in 2019, or substantial out-of-pocket medical expenses that are incurred by the commercial tenant or his or her family that caused the tenant an inability to pay the rent to the commercial landlord. A little twist to the ordinance that the county has adopted. The commercial eviction moratorium that before you tonight gives the commercial tenant up to 14 days after the rent is due to provide documentation to the commercial landlord justifying the non-payment of rent. In addition, the commercial ordinance before you tonight specifies that the commercial tenant who's been unable to pay rent has 60 days to repay it. That's similar to the county's ordinance regarding residential evictions, but the ordinance before you tonight spells out a different period of time within which the 60 days begins to run. And under the ordinance before you tonight, it runs at a variety of times, sort of depending on which is the latest. The governor granted cities and counties the power to create eviction protections for tenants who do not pay rent due to COVID-19 reasons. The governor's order, executive order, expires on May 31, 2020. The county's ordinance does not specify that it expires on May 31, 2020. It specifies that the 60-day period, however, to repay the rent begins to run when the local emergency or the health emergency ends. It's unclear. Actually, the county's ordinance is unclear as to which urgency or emergency proclamation triggers the running of the 60-day period. I clarified that in this ordinance. It begins to run on May 31, or if the May 31 date is extended by executive order of the governor, it begins to run whenever that extension terminates, or it terminates upon the lifting of the governor's proclamation of a health emergency, which he proclaimed on March 4, which has no ending date at the present time. So whichever of those various events is the latest, that begins the 60-day period for commercial tenants, as well as for commercial tenants to repay their rent.
So effectively, all these things have to be true.
What is that? I'm sorry. All things
So,
have
like,
to be true?
All the county has to have ended the order. It has to be passed May 31st. So basically, all the orders have to be lifted before this is lifted. So if the county lifts, but the state is still in place, our eviction orders still stand.
That's correct.
Okay.
How does, Jeff, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
In terms of the governor announcing like on Friday that we're moving into stage 2 and he's got the various stages, how do the stages affect the kind of COVID defense of an eviction? Let's say you run a business that's allowed in stage 2, but you don't have a good business in general.
Well, again, if you have a bad business in general, this ordinance that you have before you tonight requires you to actually document if you have a 20% bad business compared to how you were doing in 2019. So even if you may be losing money partly because of COVID-19, if you don't reach that 20% threshold, you cannot take advantage of at least the city's commercial eviction moratorium ordinance.
But it's the declaration of emergency, not the degree of shelter in place that is relevant.
Correct. It's the existence of the proclamation that he issued on March 4.
So
Thanks.
if you're a sporting goods store, which is in the new allowances, just because sporting goods stores are lifted, it doesn't mean that you are uncovered by the eviction ordinance. It means that you are still covered until the full order is completely listed and the shelter in place order is done.
Presumably, your question basically is premised on the notion that once the emergency proclamation is lifted, the shelter in place orders will likewise be lifted. I don't know if they in fact will coincide so neatly as you suggest, but the ordinance is tied not to when the shelter in place is lifted, but when the governor's proclamation of an emergency is lifted.
Okay.
It's tied to that because that's what the Supreme Court did when it issued its rule prohibiting the issuance of a summons in unlawful detainers. That particular rule also lasts for 90 days past the lifting of the governor's emergency health proclamation.
So I have a question, Mr. Mayor. My question is, with respect to this, does that mean this could go on and on and on, and the person that owns the building, the tenant would not have to pay for quite some time?
It's possible that it will go for some period that longer than we would hope. I just don't know how long the governor is going to keep his health emergency proclamation in effect. I don't know how long that's going to happen. Mm-hmm. That's the controlling trigger in this particular ordinance.
Yeah, because that's the only thing that causes me discomfort. I mean, people, as you know, it's usually trickle down, but this is trickle up. If you don't pay your rent, then the person that has the mortgage can't pay the mortgage. So I guess I'm looking for more rules or more something. I don't know what the words are, but it just seems like an unfair advantage. I'm sure, I guess I would have to imagine this is rare, but it just feels not equitable.
Right, like if the emergency declaration goes on for 2 years, that you don't pay your rent for 2 years, but there isn't any remedy for the landlord, even though they have to pay property taxes and insurance and maintenance, whatever.
Yeah, that is certainly a problem. There's no question about it. All of the moratoria that I've seen suffer from that infirmity, although there are some that include foreclosure protection on the part of the property.
What kind of foreclosure protection?
You can't foreclose for the same period. A bank cannot foreclose on the property owner's property. I thought that was.
Does the city have authority to do that?
It's unknown. mean, in terms of our own police powers, do we have the power under our own police powers to preclude foreclosure? I think we do under the governor's order that expires on May 31. But if he fails to extend that, then it's pretty much left to the city's own police powers. We certainly have the power to control rents. We know that's very true, whether they be in a mobile home or an apartment. And controlling rents can oftentimes trigger difficulties on the part of the landlord in making debt service payments. So I think given the exigencies of these circumstances, that the city's very elastic police powers would likely allow us to protect both tenants and landlords from untoward events caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, I would like to make a couple of comments.
Could we prevent foreclosure on owned residential property that isn't being rented out?
Single family dwellings.
Yeah, single family dwelling. Could we say banks are not allowed to foreclose on any single family dwelling in the city of Sonoma until the same place as the eviction?
I don't know that. I don't know the answer to that question.
That would be interesting to know. There's a lot of middle class families that are going to feel this too. There's a lot of families that own homes that are going to feel this pretty bad too. And I'm getting messages from somebody who's having troubles negotiate with their bank, and their bank is not allowing the 3-month deferment to be tacked onto the end of their lease or their mortgage. So.
Yeah, it would certainly be beneficial if the governor were to try to address these issues on a statewide basis, to leave it to each of 488 cities and 55 counties to tackle this. In my estimation, makes absolutely no sense.
So may I ask another question, Mr. Mayor? So I don't even know if that has anything to do with the league or all these other powers that have been involved in this eviction moratorium. I feel that it's fair to a point, but I'm just uncomfortable with this going on, forever and affecting the person who's above the tenant who's providing the space. I would hope between the two of them, it's in good faith, but I don't know if somebody could maybe.
Could we have it expire? Could we have it expire in 3 months or subject to renewal in 3 months? Like, could it be a short-term thing and then we reevaluate it periodically to make sure that it's not just in place?
3 months would be way too short of a time for me to support.
That was like a for example.
Yes, that would be possible.
I would consider a preliminary drop dead date of 6 months, but open for reconsideration.
What do you think about that, Madeline? Oh, I guess we're not discussing. We're just asking questions. Okay.
Could we do something like have a 6-month cap, but we would revisit it before it happens?
Yeah, I'm okay with that. I just needs to be, for me, there has to be something there for everybody. And possibly that would be more helpful than just saying, well, I'll be, whatever. I can't afford it and this is my situation and nothing's moving. So it stops the economy, actually, if it works like that. So I'm comfortable with the 6 months. It's better than.
I have a question, Mayor. I raised my hand.
Go ahead, yeah.
What I'm wondering is if we table this we could table this till the next meeting and see what is happening at the state level on the commercial side. There wouldn't be anything wrong with that. And I'm asking the attorney.
No.
Is there movement on the commercial evictions
that are in place? As we've discussed previously, the protections that are in place right now, both at the state level and at the court level, that would practically prohibit the eviction of a commercial tenant will right now, as I mentioned before, last at least 90 days after the lifting of the governor's health urgency declaration. So tabling this to the second meeting in May would not, I don't think, adversely affect a commercial tenant at this point.
But what would be the purpose? Because is there a push at the state to affirmatively include commercial or other ones? I mean, it seems like right now the state's leaving it up to the cities to make that decision. And I don't see a change happening there.
And I don't know if there's going to be a change. As we get closer to May 31, there'll be more and more pressure applied by the tenant rights organizations to the governor to extend that May 31 date, as well as to, I think, embrace commercial tenants. So I suspect we may see some changes in the state and the governor's executive orders between now and your second meeting in May. That would not surprise me at all, which could then be reflected perhaps in what comes back to you at the second meeting in May. The other thing too is that I emailed to you several cleanup changes that I was going to recommend to you tonight. I can share a screen that shows you those changes. If in fact it is the desire of the council to modify the language in the ordinance to put a 6-month end date that's revisitable, I'd recommend that you give me the direction to do that and modify the language in the ordinance between now and the second meeting in May, rather than trying to wordsmith and change the provisions in the ordinance as they stand before you tonight anyhow.
Are you comfortable with that, David?
Yes, but we're still asking questions.
That was my question.
Okay, should we bring out the public comment? All right, I'll go ahead and bring out the public comment on this item. Do we have any emailed public comment that we've received?
No email public comments so far, Mayor.
Okay.
And no one has raised their hand either.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and consider it seeing none and bring it back. If we do get email public comment on this item, please let me know and we'll jump it in, because typically previously we've been waiting 3 minutes. But if we see it throughout the discussion, I'll just go ahead and bring it back in. Great.
Okay, I'll let you know.
And who wants to make a comment? Councilmember
I can.
comment. Go ahead, Rachel, and then Amy.
Thank you. I am happy to see this coming before us. I think that it would provide a lot of certainty in the near term for both businesses and residences. The big one here being businesses, and I've heard from some who have not had success negotiating with their landlords so far and working out a deal until they can be up and have revenue again. And a large part in wanting us to do this locally was having certainty that whatever tail at the end that we give for people to be able to make up payments, that it was something that we knew that we had the authority to do. I support the ordinance without a time frame on it. I think that the set end dates line up with the reality of the problems that are facing tenants today. If having something like a 6-month end, but we would talk about it before then, was necessary to pass it, I would support that, but my preference would be to support it.
All right. Councilmember Harrington.
I mean, I think Councilmember Agrimonti's points are really well taken, that there are people that have real property that have debt on those real properties, and those aren't going to be deferred infinitely. And so, saying that it will be in place for an indefinite period of time is uncomfortable for me as well. I think 6 months is a fine period of time. And at that time, if it seems appropriate, then we could extend it again for some set period of time. But I think it's fair to say that people are still going to have to pay property tax, insurance, and in many cases a mortgage on that property. And that is not possible without any rental income. So 6 months is a pretty good period of time for landlords and tenants to work out whatever deals are going to work out. And I'm comfortable with supporting that.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I'll go ahead. I'm okay with what Councilmember Harrington said. I was wondering about the deferment just to see if maybe it's something we should wait and see what the state's doing. But I would like to see the 6 month on it, because I think having an indefinite period of time does shake up business. And when you know what the facts are, you can kind of work out the details. and hopefully the tenants and the landlords do work out something, through this. So that's what I would be supporting tonight.
And Councilmember Agrimonti.
Same, ditto. I think I've said enough.
So it looks like we have a majority for a 6-month waiting period, or basically a 6-month furlough. I mean, I think that this, for small businesses in our community and for renters, the COVID-19 crisis presents, I mean, a year or more of really serious financial problems. As we've seen in the state, less than 50% of unemployment benefits have been paid out. Most small businesses have not been able to receive federal loans. We've seen those swooped up by larger corporations. And there's a lot of pain out there. I think that this is going to have to go longer. I wouldn't be surprised if at the 6 months we go ahead and extend it. I think the state may have to step in and do something for landlords, but I mean, these are inherently investments, and as our businesses, and I really want to do anything and everything that we can to protect our small businesses. I understand the fears around, landlords losing their real property, and I think those concerns are valid, but, I mean, I would support this without the 6 months. I think it's appropriate given the nature of the situation and how badly this is decimating our small businesses in our town. I think that's a really crucial point. So I'm very glad that we're extending this to include commercial property. I'm also glad that it's being set for our tenants and our regular people just living in rental property. I'm a little scared of what happens at the end of this when you're supposed to pay back all of that money in one lump sum. So I encourage everybody to negotiate with their landlords and landlords to negotiate with their tenants, but it's an imbalanced relationship often. So, all right, go ahead and do we have a motion on this, or?
Well, what I need tonight is direction, because the ordinance needs to be fully intact for you to adopt it. It's not currently in the way you'd like to see it. It does not have a 6-month cap to it.
Well, it looks like your council direction is a 6-month cap. We have 3 members supporting that, and there you are.
Is there a desire at all to include any kind of foreclosure protection against
there is from me.
The landlords who are
Yes.
not receiving?
There is for me.
I would like to see that also.
I think the foreclosure protection is really important, because this is going to start hitting middle-class families that, they're unemployed, they were making more money able to afford a home, and now collecting unemployment is going to be significantly less than their regular income. And homes are very expensive in Sonoma. Yeah, absolutely. If we can include foreclosure protection, I totally support that.
Me too.
I also.
And me too.
All righty, I've got my direction. We'll have something for you to hopefully adopt at the next meeting.
Thank you. Great.
Mayor Harvey, can I, just in line with what Jeff said about having presented the council member with the proposed changes that he had sent prior to the meeting, I just wanted to let the council know, and any public members, that when those were provided to the council, they were also uploaded to our city website to make them available to the public. That's how we'll be handling any documents that are presented to the council after the meeting agenda, so they can be seen as a news item.
All right. Excellent. Okay.
Mary Harvey, sorry, before we leave this item, so just another item, staff, you had asked us to look into. Staff has done some. Sorry, pushed too many buttons there. My apologies. Staff has done some research into looking at some of the nonprofits that have some expertise in this area, to be able to, once council passes an ordinance, put together a page on our website that has resource information and documents to legal aid and CRLA. Looks like there may be a couple of nonprofits may also provide some mediation service. We haven't been able to drill that enough at this point, and that may be something that council wants to talk further about. But
yeah, that was Councilmember or Vice Mayor Hundley's proposal at the last meeting, if I remember correctly, that we have some sort of mediation. I would like to have that discussed more. I think there was broad council support for that previously. I remember Councilmember Harrington supporting it and Agrimonti. Not sure if David did as well, but I think we should continue to pursue that. And if we can do that, especially if Legal Aid or some other organization is doing that, if we can at least point people in the right direction, that would be ideal.
Yeah, so we'll bring back more information at the next meeting when you've got that, and you will also prepare some web information.
Well, I hope that we have a concrete discussion on this because from my conversations earlier today, it seems like this one might be falling into the trap of, well, we don't have the money for it. So maybe someone else can do it, but we can't really guarantee that it'll be available to the people in Sonoma. So whatever it is, we need to know what it is, and if we have to be able to support it, then. But you know, it's a big piece of this whole puzzle. Like being able to prohibit evictions is a big part, but then there's the makeup part, and that's the part that I think that we could really help to bring tenants and landlords together in a mutually beneficial way where they can both feel comfortable in a path forward to get their money back and the tenant to be able to do it in a way they can afford it.
Great.
Yes, so we heard this interest from council. We've not been able to put enough staff resources in it yet. And again, if there is a nonprofit that's doing this and that would take care of it, that's great. If there is a cost to this, then we would bring that back for council consideration.
Great. Excellent. Are we ready to move on to item 6.1? Yes. All right. Discussion, consideration, and possible action to adopt a resolution deferring the scheduled July 2020 water rate increase for 6 months and making findings under the California Environmental Quality Act. City Manager, Assistant
Great,
City
thank you.
Manager.
Thank you, Mayor Harvey.
Oh, you're going to
members.
take it. Okay.
I will. Thank you, Mayor Harvey, members of the council. So this is an item, if council knows, back in 2018, we did a comprehensive water rate study and approved 3 years of water rate increases. Effective July 1, 2020, there was to be a 7.5% increase that had been approved. We would be needing to do public notice of that increase at this point. And as staff looked at that, we took a look at our overall kind of water revenues and reserves. And even though there is about a 5.5% increase in our water costs this coming year from Sonoma Water Agency, which is a little over $100,000, we would recommend that you defer the water rate increase and to January 1, 2021. This goes just as another way to support both our residents and business community by allowing them not to have to have a cost increase to water now. And this is being done by some other water agencies or cities. So the action in front of you is a recommendation to basically pass a resolution and defer the water rate increase for 6 months, and be happy to take any questions.
So I guess my
Councilmember Cook.
I guess my question is, you use the word defer. You're talking about not having this in effect until January.
Right. So basically, we would still, the rate increase would still occur, but it would not occur for 6 months.
Yeah, and there would be no payback.
No, it's just we would just be pushing the increase out 6 months, and that's okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Questions? Nope. Bringing out the public comment, and as I bring out the public comment, I will note that we are not going to take public comment through Zoom chat. So you can either email us at publiccomment@sonomacity.org, or you can raise your hand in the attendees, and we'll call on you there. So public comment is open. And seeing none, I'll go ahead and bring it back to council. Very nice to not have the 3-minute awkward time. Who would like to comment on this? Go ahead, Vice Mayor Hundley.
This is something I'll definitely be supporting today. I think that of all the things that are piling up for people, this is one thing that we can do to give everyone a little break. So I'll be supporting it tonight.
And I also will be supporting it tonight.
I will also, especially now that Vice Mayor Hundley has a garden growing.
Councilmember Harrington.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the deferral of the water rate increase until January 2021.
Second.
Great. And I just want to say, absolutely, I do support this as well. I think it's a great idea. If we can alleviate some of the bill pay and some of the pain that people are taking from the city, then we should absolutely do it. This is a tough time for everybody, and this is a great way to do it. So with that, let's go ahead and have a roll call vote.
Vice Mayor Hundley,
Aye.
Councilmember Harrington,
Aye.
Councilmember Agrimonti,
Aye.
Councilmember Cook,
Aye.
Mayor Harvey.
Yes, great.
Thank you. Motion carries unanimously.
Appreciate it. Item 6.2, consideration, discussion, and possible action of the Sonoma City's climate action and environmental sustainability accomplishments and 2020 to 2021 work plan. Community Services Director, Travis Wagner.
And Mayor Harvey, if I can just introduce Travis first as we get, he's going to be putting a brief PowerPoint up. So delighted to have Travis, who is our sustainability coordinator and comes with amazing resume and background to work with our community, and a Valley resident as well. So he has a history, as you know, Sonoma has a good history of environmental focus. And really what we've got now is we have a 2-year half-time position for Travis. And so as we look at what we can get done in this 2-year window and half-time position, it's important to step back and say, what have we done and what do we want to do going forward, and just kind of do a review so that hopefully the council feels comfortable with where you want Travis and staff to be spending their time. And so with that, I asked Travis to do a kind of a report and a summary of the actions, and he'll have that in front of you, and then some ideas and some new ideas he has for a work plan. So with that, I'll turn it to Travis, and thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Mayor Harvey and council members. I'm going to hit my share screen and hopefully this works. Everyone see that okay? Okay, good. So briefly, the presentation outline, I'm going to just look at historical greenhouse gas emissions for context, status report overview, status report results, and the next steps. So looking at the 2005 greenhouse gas emissions, the important point here is to look at the 3 largest sources: on-road transportation, which is really fossil fuel driven, especially motor vehicles, building energy use, which is electricity and natural gas, and solid waste, which is predominantly the disposal of organics and the generation of methane. Comparing the 2010 to 2015, couple of things to note here is transportation emissions has increased by 16.68%. Because we're driving more vehicle miles. Interestingly, as buildings went down significantly, which almost offset that. And that's predominantly from switching to Clean Power Sonoma and adopting the opt-out aspect of Clean Start. And then solid waste looks like it's gone up dramatically. Part of that is the Regional Climate Protection Authority noted that it was improved reporting. So it's not as dramatic as it appears, but certainly waste waste has gone up during that period. So to look at to do the status report overview, first of all, I just want to say that while there are many actions the community can do, when I say community, it's the government, residential, commercial, institutional sector, and nonprofits, all of us together. While there's many things that can be done with regards to climate action and sustainability, what this report is going to demonstrate collectively, the community has put forth a lot of actions and efforts towards climate action sustainability, which everyone should be proud of for sure. And so what I did was I compiled the community's climate actions and sustainability efforts and accomplishments. I very briefly explored some potential innovative climate action options to try to get significant reductions, and then drafted a recommended environmental sustainability city work plan. So the climate actions and sustainability accomplishments are in these following categories, and that's how I'm going to approach them, just looking at energy, water resources, transportation, waste reduction, and miscellaneous. So with regards to energy, I identified 19 programs, initiatives, and actions specifically to reduce energy consumption through increased efficiency and conservation. The largest likely reductions came about through Sonoma Clean Power, like I said, switching to the Clean Start program. The street and safety lighting efficiency by the city, converting the street lights, and also Caltrans switching out the traffic and safety lights to better, higher efficiency lighting. And then solar photovoltaic installations. I will note that right now, looking at the number of the percentage of city homes that have PV solar, it's at least 14%. I have not been able to go back beyond 2015 for building permits, but I think that's a real positive. Looking at the work plan recommendations would be to increase the number of customers using Clean Start or Evergreen through Sonoma Clean Power. Approximately, I think it's about 13% of customers, and let me back up, I'll say this is within zip code, the Sonoma zip code, so it's not limited to the city, that we cannot differentiate between those living outside of the city but still in the zip code. But about 13% of customers decided to opt out of Clean Start and going back to the PG&E standard offer, which is interesting because the PG&E standard offer is about 7% more expensive and certainly substantially more carbon intensive. Identify and develop a local carbon offset program. So we're making these achievements to reduce our emissions, but trying to capture and sequester carbon is another program. There's some interesting innovative approaches going in Marin County. And this is something we can do locally through, there's numerous programs that can be looked at that would, I think, also be beneficial to visitors as well as residents. And it's something that's going to be, I think, more popular in comment. Assess the viability of Bay Share Sun Shares program. I can't find any existence of it in Sonoma County. Other Bay Area counties have done it. And it's basically a small grant program to help support bulk purchasing of PV solar units. So it would allow neighborhoods to group together and get significant price reductions, because the capital investment is certainly the biggest obstacle on PV photovoltaic rooftop systems. And then increase the number of county-sponsored free PV solar consultations. The county offers free, unbiased consultations, and there's been relatively very few here in Sonoma. So I think that's an area that can be done relatively easy. Water resources, I found 9 programs. The largest likely reductions are the leak letters, which are letters sent out in which there's a potential leak to help identify it as a problem and stop that leak. And then the turf removal program, which is to remove turf and replace that with something that doesn't require as much water irrigation. Regarding the work plan recommendations is to continue the public works efforts to install advanced metering infrastructure. Estimates are from, I believe it's 9 to 15% reduction in water consumption just through advanced metering. It also would eliminate the need for leak letters because customers would be notified immediately. And then to look at increasing the education and outreach to further support the turf removal rebate program, sorry. With transportation, there's 13 programs to reduce petroleum-based transportation. The largest likely reductions are alternative motor vehicles, looking at vehicles, electric vehicles, but also hybrid, plug-in hybrid. Right now, it's about 2% of all vehicles in the zip code are predominantly electric vehicles or other sources. It's not a significant number, and there hasn't been really much in reduction, but there are trends that we look at positive. And the fare-free public transit has been very successful, especially compare that with other jurisdictions in the county. Some work plan recommendations are to increase the installation of EV charging stations. The number of EV vehicles is going to increase, and so having the infrastructure to support that for residents, customers, and visitors is essential. Consider supporting the creation of a local nonprofit to create bike and pedestrian trails. So it's trying to help people get out of their vehicle. And this is a model that's been adopted by some other jurisdictions across the country, in which the nonprofit just focuses on creating networks of bike and pedestrian trails that are also green spaces. And of course, continue increasing bicycle and pedestrian safety, again, trying to remove any barriers from not wanting to bike or walk. Waste minimization, I found 27 programs. I'm sure there are some more out there, but those are the ones I found, along with a shout out to staff and everyone else that's been involved in this as well. The largest likely reductions are the free collection of residential curbside recycling, organics, and food waste. So it's one of the key aspects is source separation, so that you remove that from disposal. And so offering that free collection helps encourage that source separation. So that's been very successful.
I would note here that Sonoma County Garbage currently has organics curbside recycling. It's $1. I participate in the program, and they can take basically anything except for meat and cheese.
Yes.
So it's been really nice for me. It's been something I've been using for a while. You can put paper products in there. Just put a paper bag on the floor, grab all my trimmings and all my onion tops and bottoms, and it works quite well. So yeah, it's a very underutilized program.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, thank you, Mayor. It should be noted that that's plant-based food waste in the organics. And then the tier-based pricing, which is you pay a certain price on a volume. The more you generate, or the larger volume container, you pay more. Yeah. So looking at some work plan recommendations, is SB 1383 is going to be significant. So it would be to assess and support compliance with that. I think overall, compared to some other jurisdictions, Sonoma is doing okay, but it's going to take some work, specifically on reaching out and getting fewer organics in the disposal.
Travis, can you, I'm sorry, this is Kathy.
Sure.
Can you maybe just explain a little bit what is SB 1383 for folks that may not be aware?
Absolutely. So to kind of capture it, it is designed to reduce the disposal of organics, because organics, especially food waste, when landfilled, generates methane, which is a far more potent greenhouse gas on a molecule basis. And so what's interesting about this program is it's really looking at the city to ensure compliance. So that the city is going to be responsible for compliance, and thus they can be held responsible going on down the road. So it's looking at removing more food waste out, but it's also trying to ensure the best management of that. So if there's any edible food, it's to recover that food and redistribute that. So those are the type of programs that are going to require some effort. Also to working with commercial customers to make sure they're maximizing their segregation of food waste, as well as residents. Because like I said, the city is going to be held responsible for compliance of generators. So this is a new kind of a new approach. And so there's going to be a lot of, as I scroll down here, part of this is a lot of outreach and education to customers, but also dealing with the food recovery aspect is going to be really important. And also another aspect is to increase or improve recycling collection, because recycling that's contaminated with non-recyclables is problematic because it increases the cost. And that's just going to continuously be a challenge. So the recommendation is to see that, figure out what the barriers, what the issues are, and to maximize outreach to try to increase or decrease the extent of contamination in curbside recycling and commercial. And to improve the plaza waste reduction initiatives, looking at, again, to decrease the generation, especially of single-use plastics, and we're always looking at to maximize the segregation of materials into their proper containers. And so the final category, there's 11 programs I found that I would view as enhancing sustainability and likely reduce greenhouse gases directly or indirectly. And some of the largest likely enhancements and reductions are the protected space. 16 parks, 2 open spaces. These are really important for ecological sustainability, recreation, and also, if treated correctly, carbon sequestration. There's about 100 farmers market days per year. So it's that access to local agriculture and food, but it also supports local economy. And that doesn't include in the Springs itself, there's a farmers market as well. This is just within the city boundaries at the 3 locations. And the tree protection ordinance, always looking at sort of the no net loss in canopy and trees. So for the work plan recommendations under the miscellaneous category is to update the city's sustainability website. The CSCC has been instrumental in moving this along, but what I think the focus should be is to really focus on providing tools and information and support so that the community can identify what they can do to achieve sustainability, whether it's the consultations or mini grants and so forth and so on. So that's one recommendation. And then working with the chamber is to increase the number of certified green businesses and to continue to support the Shop Local Sonoma program. Okay, and so the next step recommendations are the council to review and comment on the status report itself, and then to provide guidance on the recommended city's work plan priorities that I kind of went over rather quickly, but are all detailed in the status report. And I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Questions from council?
Oh, I have, let me see.
Go ahead, Mal.
Yeah, thanks. I'm sorry, Travis, I forgot your last name, so may I address you with your first name? Oh, there it is right in front of me, Mr. Wagner. I think these are all fine things that we do, but what the heck with greenhouse gases? Well, I guess things are slowing down, but Amazon, FedEx, UPS, Uber, and Lyft, they're the biggest criminals of this. And there's nothing we can do. I think on Amazon, Jeff Bezos said his cars by such and such a day would be electric. I don't know how possible that is yet because of so many things that are going on. But somehow it seems as if that's I guess it's way beyond anything we can do in this beautiful town of Sonoma. But it seems to be one of the biggest problems we have. But I'm sorry. So I think you've done wonderful work. I love the issue of the EV, the charging stations. I think those are great. And I actually think that with new building, I think we also have EV hookups available for people, which I think is wonderful. But my biggest concern, of course, still is the other. And it's beyond us.
Yeah, one of the challenges is transportation, and the reality is our nation is a car-based culture, and that's going to be the biggest challenge. And converting to lower or no fossil fuel generated vehicles is really important. So I don't think there's much that we can do for that, but we can create the infrastructure to support that, because if people are going to come here, we want them to use fossil fuel, no fossil fuel electric vehicles. So having those that infrastructure will help support that.
Other comments from council?
Aren't we on questions?
Or questions from council? I'd have a question. With regards to 1383 and our local restaurants and hotels, how many of them have robust, what you would call a robust composting program? And how many do not? I mean, is it a significant number of them that are composting fairly well?
Well, I honestly can't answer that. That would be one of the recommendations, to go out and do that site-specific inventory. Certainly during these times, food waste generation obviously has gone down significantly, but the information that we have is based on discussions with the hauler. And
so what
the next step would be to go out and do that site-specific inspection and to ensure.
So what is the message you're getting from the hauler in terms of what percentage of our waste is being diverted from landfill? I mean, what percentage of our waste is landfill waste? What percentage is?
I have that information. I don't have it right in front of me, and I can send that to you. I have it broken down for the past 6 years. But I will say that the food waste generation over the past, I believe it's 6 years, has gone down 50% according to the hauler. And the per capita generation of residential waste has gone down about 6%. So all the data is showing that we are on that downward trend, which is really, really positive. But certainly more that can be done, but we would need to go out and do site inspections.
Yeah, I think it's going to be really crucial. I mean, the fines, the potential fines with AB 1383 are significant. I mean, in the hundreds of thousands of dollars for small municipalities, and it's easy to get there. The fines are also, correct me if I'm wrong, but they can also fine businesses as well. So this is a really important bill that people aren't paying attention to, and something that's really going to creep up. I'm glad you're on top of it, and I know your expertise and background is in this. So I'm glad Sonoma has you on board. But it's a really dangerous. I mean, it's a scary situation, especially with how much money we are going to be down in terms of revenue, to look at potential $100,000 fines.
Yes, absolutely.
With the EV charging stations, have you identified sources of funding? Is Sonoma Clean Power the predominant place where we could get funding to help with EV charging stations?
Yes. So what's interesting about their program, it's not a grant, it's a rebate. So either it's for private or public, or private public. So it's not limited to anyone. Their goal is just to increase that. So whoever went forward, so if the city went forward, they would have to get approval and then pay for it and then get a rebate. Their program was going to start October 1st. They recently just moved it back to July 1st. It's not competitive per se. So it's, from what I understand, it's a rolling until they run out of money for that year. And I believe it's funded for 3 years, but the money decreases each year. But it's a significant amount of money, and it's in their area. So it's Sonoma and Mendocino.
With regards to bike infrastructure and getting people out of their cars, what sort of recommendations are you making that be studied? Are we looking at bike parking as well as bike lanes and the rest of it?
That is in there. I haven't made specific recommendations.
It's after talking to CSCC.
Yeah. Well, and part of that is these are identified as areas, but we would need council recommendation as to how to prioritize time in what should this position focus on, because it is part-time fixed length, and that's one of many that, as you can see in the document. But there obviously would be, I would hope, guidance from CSCC if we brought that to them to provide specifics.
Okay. Other questions from council?
I have another question, Travis. I don't see anything, and possibly I'm wrong, with respect to CRV recycling, and I understand that we are part of a grant proposal through Zero Waste to bring, I think it's a mobile unit that comes throughout the cities for recycling, and I don't know what the status is, and you possibly don't either, but I know, maybe because of what's going on, but I know that our city did request to be part of that grant.
Correct. They're collecting all the MOUs from all the participants because they have to have a full package to go to Recycle with that. So that's, as far as I know, what the status is, if they're still in that, collecting all the MOUs for that, and then they could go ahead and put forth their proposal. But yeah, it's would be a great project. It looks pretty positive.
Oh, thanks, Travis. Thank you.
Sure.
I have a question. Do you know when our city EV chargers were installed? What year?
I don't.
Any idea? I was thinking maybe 8 years ago, but I don't actually know.
I don't know.
That's okay. I'm just wondering.
I think it's in the report, I would hope, but maybe not.
All right. Well, that's good. Let's go ahead and bring it out for public comment. I believe we got one submitted to us by email, but the person who submitted to us is also here. So I don't know if Fred wants to speak for himself or have LaTanya read him.
I don't have an email.
Oh, I saw one that we got.
That was the emails that are received prior to the meeting, Logan, are not read at the
Oh, they're
meeting.
just public record.
They're council and put onto the public record and the civic web.
All right, well, I'll go ahead and open public comment, see if anybody raises their hands. I see Fred raising his hand.
Yes, we have Fred all back. You can go ahead, Fred.
Okay, I just want to say that I'm very supportive of Travis's work plan. I'm really glad that it got on the agenda here, and that Travis's time at the city here can be uncorked for the remainder of his term, and I hope his term is extended. And I think it all looks good, and I'm supportive of his work plan.
Thanks, Fred. Anyone else for public comment? I see Matt Metzler.
Matt, you can go ahead and speak.
Go what Fred said. I really appreciate the council bringing Travis on board. He's done a great job with the commission. I look forward to continuing to work with him in the future.
Thank you, Fred. Or thank you, Matt. All right. Go ahead and close public comment. 3, 2, 1, and it's closed. And we'll go ahead and bring it back for council member comments. Anybody would like to go? Looks like Vice Mayor Hundley. Go ahead.
Thank you. Travis, I am so thankful you are part of our team now, because this is the exact thing that we needed, someone with the time and capacity to focus on and to make to figure out these things that are totally doable, but it's just a matter of discerning which ones fit. And so I'm looking at your priorities. EV charging stations have been on my list for a while. I had heard that it was difficult in the city, and we do have the 2 in the city lot that I think when they were installed, it was, quite exciting at the time, but they are very old and outdated. I myself purchased an electric hybrid vehicle 1.5 years ago and couldn't charge at home, so I tried to charge it there, and it is like the Hunger Games. It is very difficult to get in, and it does break a lot. And just even watching sort of the proliferation of these, both here and at my parking deck where I work, it seems like there's like a second wave happening. And being able to have them, I think, will not only draw people to the plaza, which we'd like to do, but it would also make more people realize that it makes sense to these kinds of vehicles. So that's been on the top of my list for a while. But another thing that seems to have finally gotten the sort of mainstream conversation is waste and waste management. And people are starting to learn more about trash and the fact that there are things to consider when you throw things away and where to go and how things are recyclable and the steps to take. And I think that people are willing to do these things. It's just a matter of us taking the time to make sure everyone understands and maybe have programs to incentivize it. So I think that waste reduction, especially in light of the lifespan of our landfill is really important. And then I also like the, in your miscellaneous, about for our local businesses. We have so many local businesses, and it also seems like, you know, having a renewed effort in getting certified green businesses and keeping people local and less online deliveries. Like, these are just great things that Sonomans, I think, are posed to do, and it would be, with a little bit of effort, we could get everyone on board. I thought it was interesting, your suggestion of a local carbon offset program, because I've thought a lot about our economy and the fact that it's based on tourism, which is very challenging when it comes to vehicle miles traveled. But I think that if we're going to have something, an economy like this, then building ourselves a model where we can offset the things that we cannot reduce through other methods, I think is the only way forward. So I'm excited to see that on there. And then my final comment is with respect to about, you know, bike and pedestrian trails, improving bike and pedestrian safety. It kind of makes me wish that we had this discussion before our last meeting, but there's still work to do on that regard. But I think this is great, and it all seems, you know, within our ability to really accomplish these things. And I appreciate you looking at the list that I mean, it must have been, what, 2014 or 15 when we picked the Climate Action 2020 list, and sort of looking at those and comparing it to what makes the biggest impact and where our efforts should be spent. This is exactly what we should be doing. So this is great. Thank you.
All right, I see Councilmember Cook has his hand up.
Yeah, I just want to say good job, Travis. I'm very impressed with seeing everything in one spot. You know, community engagement is something that's very important to me. And as I was reading through the list, you know, earlier in the day, there's all these things that are out there, and hopefully part of the plan will be that we can get more community engagement where they can bring paint and different things. Because one of my biggest issues is with, you know, recycling and our waste, and trying to curb that throughout time. Because I know even in the business community, it's something that's very important to even tell your customers when they come to your stores, and have that availability and get that message out. So I'd really like to see something with the business community as far as the Chamber of Commerce getting involved with outreach also. But great job, and thank you for all your hard work.
Other comments? Councilmember Harrington?
Oh, just echo the comments of everyone else. Great work, and thank you for the report. And I'm the liaison for Clean Power for our council, and I'm glad that you're connecting with SCP to take advantage of those possibilities. And I think it's awesome. Thanks.
Thank you. This is Madeline. Thank you, Travis. It's something that we needed to get back into, and so I think you've done a wonderful job of bringing this all back to the forefront.
Great. All right, well, I want to thank Travis as well for the hard work that he's done, and CSEC for staying on these issues for a long time, and previous councils for the works that they've done to create LED light bulbs and get us on the Sonoma Clean Power Initiative program. I think the piece with transportation is really important. It's our largest greenhouse gas emitter. I take the bus to Santa Rosa when I was working, when I had to go there. Now I'm sheltering in place, but I'd take the bus and ride in, and they have great bike infrastructure there. Makes it quite easy. And the bus 30 goes right from Sonoma right to there. And it doesn't take too much additional time, and it's allowed us to keep just one car in our family. I thank Madeline for her work with the Fare Free Shuttle. It's been absolutely incredible to see how many people are riding it, and the major increases, especially in youth ridership. I think it is the way of the future. And it's really encouraging. I mean, it's maybe a COVID effect, but the amount of people that you see biking and walking and jogging around town is impressive. It's really a change and a major reduction in traffic. And what we're seeing now is from reductions in pollution, we're saving lives throughout the world. I think it was some study that was done that 20,000 lives plus have been saved in India just through the results of pollution reduction. And we're seeing clearer skies throughout the world. So I think there are some benefits there. And if we can retain some of this reduced travel and reduced traffic, that would be really fantastic. On the waste piece, I think it's really important that we work on that hard. The outreach piece is really important. That's what I do professionally for Recology Sonoma Marin, is talk to businesses about how they can improve their waste streams and how they can get compostables out of their waste stream. And it's extremely important that we do that. So I look forward to seeing that outreach done here. People can save money a lot of times, and you're saving the planet as well. And so we've been able to greatly increase the amount of tonnage that's getting out of landfill and going into compostable facilities. And it speaks again to the need for a countywide a composting facility in Sonoma County, which is one that we don't have yet. And there's some opposition, but there is a good site that's been identified. And right now, compost trucks are driving to Richmond to dump their material off, which is bad for labor because they're sitting in traffic for 10 hours. Maybe not that long, but it feels that long at the end of a long day that they start at 5 in the morning. It makes it difficult. So anyway, great. Appreciate your work. Do we need direction on prioritization? I mean, for me, I think the outreach to businesses on recycling is really important. I think EV charging stations is really key as well, as Rachel said. I think being prepared for the next wave of new cars. I mean, I heard a release that GM is going to have an almost all electric lineup in the next couple of years. So I think it's important to have that infrastructure there so that can be used. And bike infrastructure. There's been a lot of complaints about bicycle parking on the plaza. There's that weird spider thing that is allegedly a bike parking spot, but I think that study would be important too. So do we need direction or?
So Mayor Harvey, if the council's done comments, then we would like you to accept the report and approve the work plan.
All right.
So moved.
Second.
All right, roll call vote, please.
Vice Mayor Hundley,
Aye.
Councilmember Harrington,
Aye.
Councilmember Agrimonti,
Aye.
Councilmember Cook,
Aye.
Mayor Harvey.
Yes.
Thank you. The motion carries unanimously.
All right. Item 6.3, discussion, consideration, possible action to adopt a resolution amending the city's Affordable Housing Trust Fund and administrative guidelines to include rent and utility payment assistance needs for very low income, and moderate income households during the time of a declared emergency, authorizing city manager to execute an agreement with Fish to invest in the balance of housing trust fund for such purpose, finding this exempt under CEQA. City manager.
Thank you, Mayor Harvey, members of council. So just a little background here. As you all know, about mid-March, we issued a state of emergency, and as part of council's ratification, they approved and set aside $100,000 from reserves for a community support and resiliency fund. We weren't quite sure what that was going to be needed for, but we're looking at rental assistance, special projects, support to business, et cetera, and looking at this money was going to need to last for some time as we looked at these, not knowing what was ahead. And then the council also approved Mayor Harvey and Councilmember Harrington to be a subcommittee and to work with the city manager on that. So we've met a couple times and reviewed, and one of the things that's become very clear is the issue of rental assistance, and the need there, as I think everyone is well aware, is kind of wide and deep. And so just currently, so the recommendation was to have council take a look at the Housing Trust Fund and make some modifications that the funding in the Housing Trust Fund could be used for rental assistance and utility payments. So that is one of the items in front of you tonight, as Mayor Harvey read in the title. For background, there currently is about $166,000 in the Housing Trust Fund. Most of that has been generated from the last year since went into effect in September when council took 1% of TOT and programmed it for 3 years for housing. In addition, I wanted to let council know last week we did receive a kind of a reimbursement from Saha, our affordable housing developer on the Broadway project. That was there was $75,000 the council loaned that development, which is one of the things cities do is loan, kind of pre-development construction loan funding as a way to assist nonprofit affordable housing folks to move forward their projects. So that 75,000 came back, and the council can make a policy decision, not tonight, but as part of budget, that could be considered as part of their housing trust fund, or could go back to general fund reserve. We had a conversation about that a number of months ago at one point. So in Sonoma, the kind of the lead organization is FISH, which is Friends in Sonoma Helping, well respected. They have been doing a lot of rental assistance. They had $180,000 budgeted this year and have basically used all that funding. They're continuing to raise money, get donations, et cetera. And what they do is they basically pay 50% of someone's rent utility payments up to $1,000. So the recommendation in front of you is to modify the housing trust fund and allow the city manager to use the full current amount, which is $166,000, to assist in rental assistance. The one other item just to inform you of is literally yesterday, we received information, and I'll let David Storer, our planning director, tell you about this, but we did learn about a brand new program that just got put out on the street from the California Housing Community Development Department about a matching grant program for cities that have housing trust funds. So it came up, and it is an important piece. Just briefly, I'll let David just tell you what that is, and then we'll have to come back to council if you want to talk more about that when its agenda is separately.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Harvey and council members. Welcome from Folsom, California. I think I went for the longest commute, but that's another story for another day. Yeah, so as Kathy was saying, it was actually Thursday when HCD released a NOFA, a Notice of Funding Availability, to the tune of about $57 million for matching grants. So the good news here is that we are considered a new housing trust fund program under the state's definition, which will allow us to submit a grant request from $500,000 anywhere up to $5 million. The trick here, though, is that we would need to have a matching number that they're to give to us on deposit at the time when they actually award the grants if we're successful. The interesting thing is that this has a very short window of when you can apply. We can actually not apply at the moment. They have a window. Everything's done online, no hard copies anymore, which is a good thing in light of what we've just discussed. But the window of opportunity is for us to submit anywhere between July the 15th and August 3rd. And for those of us that do the math, that's 19.5 calendar days that they're going to actually have this window for us, municipalities. And that's for municipalities that have either a new housing trust fund like ours, which is less than a year old, versus communities that are considered to have existing housing trust funds that are a year or more and older. And so the award announcement will come from HCD on their website in October. So there's a window of opportunity, a time between now and October when we either may or may not be successful in this grant application. With respect to eligible activities, they do help us pay for, with those funds, with matched funds, pre-development costs, acquisition for rental housing projects, emergency shelters, permanent supportive housing, transitional housing. And the neat thing is it also includes the ability to help first-time home buyers to either purchase or rehab their particular homes. And of course, the catch-all, in addition to those that I've just mentioned, is for the construction, repair, reconstruction, rehab of ADUs and JDUs. So again, hot off the press, still reading the guidelines, and we actually won't see the application until July 15th that we have to fill out online. So again, an opportunity. I think it's a great one for the city to participate in. Whether we're successful or not, though, that depends on how well our application competes with the other 50 or so housing trust fund agencies and the private housing trust funds as well. That's the end of my report, Mr. Mayor.
Great.
So happy to answer questions, Mayor Harvey.
Question.
Or then also again,
do you want to?
subcommittee wants to speak.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Sorry.
In talking to Fish, their average housing grant is $700. So we can kind of divide the amount of money that we give by about $700 to determine how many families we might help. I saw a recent statistic that said 43% of Latinos in the Valley have zero income now. So I think there's a desperate need for that. Logan and I had talked with Kathy about the idea of doing a $50,000 increment, coming back to council and getting a report for Fish, and then authorizing another instead of doing one bulk amount, but doing 50 and then seeing another 50 or whatever would be appropriate at that time. In terms of the new, and Fish is such an amazing, organization. So it's great that we can get the help out right away. The terms of the recipients, we talked about being people who live or work in the town of Sonoma, or people who work in industries that support the economy of the town of Sonoma and the broader valley. In terms of the matching grant, I think that's really exciting and great. I could imagine that at that time we could perhaps transfer some funds from reserves in order to have funds on hand that could be matched, in order to try and see if we could do that, since we don't know about our potential success. But I do think we could make an immediate real impact on people who are really desperate right now with the housing assistance. So I hope that we can do this. And then in terms of the use of the housing trust fund versus the $100,000, we also talked about the ideas of can the city do something infrastructure wise to support our economy? If that means, setting up something so restaurants can bump out onto Spain Street, but we pay for the infrastructure of that. We'd like to be able to, put up lights or whatever it is that we could do to help, not just one time, but really support business in a long, ongoing way. So we kind of talked about using the funds for something more permanent like that of the 100,000. And then in terms of authorizing the full amount of the trust fund, we felt that if Kathy came back to us in increments, we could say no, but then we wouldn't have to vote again to authorize the use of the trust fund for this purpose. So it would be generally expanding the use of the trust fund to include this purpose, but coming back with reports about how it's going and then making decisions in increments about what to spend specifically.
Great. And I want to thank Amy for your leadership on this one. I think you reached out to Fish and coordinated really well with them. And so I really appreciate that. I also had discussions with Juan from La Luz, and there's kind of a feeling that there's two separate rental assistance programs, one that La Luz runs and one that Fish does. From what I understand from Juan and direct conversation with him, La Luz's program basically runs through Fish. So Fish is the pot of money, and La Luz does the kind of talking to donors or talking to people who need the rental assistance. They do that kind of Spanish language interaction, and then they pull from the Fish's money. And in conversations with him, he thought, maybe even La Luz would be able to donate some money into the Fish program as well. So I think there's some kind of consideration about, I think some people may be like, well, why aren't you donating to La Luz's program and Fish's program? I think the reality is if we're donating to Fish's program, it is La Luz's program as well. I think it's important that people understand that aspect. Do we have questions from council? Rachel?
Rachel.
Thank you. A few questions. One to David Storer, as far as the matching grant, is there any, what are the requirements from our side other than just having a housing fund? If we need a certain amount of money, or does that affect how much you get?
What happens is they're called program funds that they're going to release. We have to match dollar for dollar what they have. I can hear a siren going on, I'm sure.
Let's see. And so has any of the $100,000 for the resiliency fund that we allocated a month or so ago, has any of it been spent yet?
$8,000 went to KSBY.
See. And as far as the recommendation from the funding for the city, are there any particular parameters or requirements for the use of the city funds in light of the fact that it's tax money?
The parameters are the ones discussed previously, which is you have to live or work in the city of Sonoma or live in the Sonoma Valley, but work in an industry that contributes to the underlying economy of the city of Sonoma.
And who makes those determinations?
Fish would.
So yeah, I think the plan, what we would do, we would be doing an agreement with Fish and any of the kind of policy or program level requirements that the council wanted to put, we would be articulating that, and then looking for some kind of report back. We would definitely want to be looking at, you know, there's probably, again, the Housing Trust Fund talks about, you know, low income, very low. And so we may be wanting to look a little and moderate. I would assume we'd be wanting to have folks that are in those three categories.
I know that we've talked about the SOCOM money and we have the resiliency fund money. Is there any other funding sources, probably Kathy, that could be accessed to help programs?
Sorry, that could be other funding sources that could be used for what, Councilmember Hundley?
Just to support a program like this.
Not that I'm aware of. It really would be general fund reserves, or other, you know, funding where you've got that is set aside. You know, the council did just pass the housing impact fees, and over time those will gather some additional funding to go into the Housing Trust Fund, but nothing's been collected at this point.
Well, I think we had discussed also the possibility of some sort of loan from the general reserves that could get repaid through one of these other sources, like the 1%.
For the match, yeah, for the, I mean, if you're gonna, in terms of the match program, we'd want to learn more, but and look at how that could work. Again, right now, you could think about it as 166 plus the 75,000. So generally, maybe a little over 225,000 is what council, again, if you put that 75,000 in, that might be available. I think the grant, as I understand it, Mr. Storer, has a $500,000 minimum. So we would need to put in the additional funding. One thing you could do if council's interested in this, and again, we'll want to look at this related to kind of variety of other needs for reserve, but this was, you know, if you can get this kind of 1-for-1 match from the state, it's a very powerful tool that we'd want to look at. Yeah. But what you could do is we could potentially maybe take, create an interfund loan, or, you know, basically pull money maybe from one of our reserves. And then because this loan, sorry, the grant program, you have to spend over 5 years. So, and you would have time within the TOT 1% or other funding sources to come in to then kind of repay that reserve. So I think there's a way over kind of a 2 to 3 year period that could work, and that the council could potentially look at this. Again, this has all been in the last 24 hours, so we'd want to come back and talk to you more about this program. So regardless of which way council goes with the rental assistance program, and again, if we're going to do it as a first kind of $50,000 kind of first chunk, then there would still be time kind of to us to learn more, come back with the grant and look at all this as well.
Okay. And my last question is, has there been any information or data about requests to fish that would fall into the working in Sonoma or living in Sonoma categories? Or I know that they've gone through their budget already, but as far as the waiting list and what the need is.
I'll let Councilmember Harrington add too, but I think part of what we would do with this program is we would want to put some information out and do some marketing for it, potentially with fish, that, you know, to make sure that people in the city limits are aware of the program too. So that's, you know, that's a piece that could be done, and then directing folks to fish. I don't know.
Was that your question? Or was your question, do we already know what the need is?
Well, I'm just wondering if there's any information about what, as far as categories of people working in Sonoma and people living in Sonoma, what has been distributed before, and if they have an idea or waiting list of what's outstanding, or if that would be related to outreach. Just anything like supporting like this number that we're throwing out.
Well, the super majority of people that are served by fish are residents of the valley. Almost all. It's a valley nonprofit. So that's the area they serve. And then with regard to people that work in industries that support Sonoma, so for example, if someone lives in the Springs but is a vineyard worker, people come here for the wine tourism, and that work supports our economy in town, in addition to people that work here.
No, I'm just wondering, like, actual, like, numbers. Like, is there, like, numbers?
The numbers are that they already spent their entire annual budget on rental assistance, and they have people applying every single day. And so in order to continue doing rental assistance this year, they will need additional funds, because in the first 6 months of this year, they have spent their entire annual budget.
So do they have a waiting list? Do they have an idea of, like, to everyone that's applied now, what the gap is, like, numbers?
So they provide rental assistance, and they are doing it now. I forget whatever it was, $180,000, but those people need to pay their rent every month. So if their funds come up to zero, they can provide rental assistance to no one starting next month, right?
My understanding is that at least La Luz has turned nobody away for our rental assistance whatsoever. As far as the number of people and where they live, no, I do not have those numbers. I'm not sure if they track that or if they look at what people's incomes are. And
well, I mean, I'm sure they have the information about how much they've given out and how much people have asked for that they don't have, and what the gap is. Like, there's got to be numbers.
Amy just described that. Yeah.
So I think the information that I requested and we talked from their executive director is that basically they had spent $60,000 in January, February, March. And then in April, they spent $140,000. So again, so that they saw that kind of increase in need just between, but I don't have a gap. I don't have a list of, some of those, that other information they may have, we don't have that with us tonight.
And the average number they spend per person is $700. So you could divide the 140,000 by 700 and determine the approximate number of people they serve.
Question?
It's interesting. I think, Amy, you channeled through me, because I was asking about increments of 50,000 today when I spoke to Kathy. And because that gives us, it gives us some room. But do you think we need to have like a maximum of what that number might be? 3 times 50,000? I mean, I don't know. That's just,
I think the idea was just that, like, when we wrote our housing trust fund, one of the allowable purposes was not rental assistance. And so there's a policy question about, like, in general, should rental assistance be part of our housing trust fund allowable purposes? That's a general question. And then the specific amount, I think we could decide kind of as we go, assuming that we believe that rental assistance is an appropriate purpose for our housing trust fund. So kind of like twofold. And so that's why I thought, like, 50,000, and then let's say Council Member Hundley wants, specific data, that before we allocate any more money, we would get that data for her and whatever else people were interested in, so that we would have additional statistics. So that was kind of my thought on it, which was it should be in a generally allowable purpose, subject to council approval of any specific amounts.
right. And I'm glad you brought that up, Councilmember Harrington, about the, about the difference between housing and rental assistance, because I can't say we fought for it, but we certainly wanted this to be something that was viable for people who wanted to go into housing. So I'm kind of sad that we have to make these decisions.
Yeah.
It's like choosing between, I was going to use an example, but it sounds ugly. So, but it's like choosing between two highly respected nonprofits that work with physical disabilities. So which one are we going to choose? So I guess that's sort of sad for me.
Between who?
Pardon?
Between who?
Okay, cerebral palsy and multiple
No, for us. For us.
I mean,
For
that's
us.
like two good groups, and this is exactly what these are: rental assistance and the housing trust fund.
Oh, okay.
They're two good things, and we worked for it. I don't know. I mean, I felt that we did. Just to have something that said that was really monumental, I think. But I still believe in this, and I like the $50,000 increments, because I think, as you have offered, it makes sense. And I personally know some people who are professional people, you know, possibly on the bottom rung of society, doing wonderful work, things like hairdressers. But they need money.
Yeah.
They can support themselves for the first times in their lives.
I'm kind of thinking it was like when we did our the housing workshop, that they talked about preserving lowercase a affordable housing, that it's about keeping people housed. And so we don't want to create more homeless people, and we want to preserve people that are teetering on the edge in the housing that they already have. And if we can do that with a $700 or $1,000 help so that they don't have all their rent due, just like we talked about during the evictions, as soon as the shelter in place is over, I think that would be a good thing to do.
And it's wonderful that we can try. We will hopefully make it available.
Other questions of council? Nope. All right, I'll bring it up to public comment. See Fred.
Fred, you can go ahead and speak.
Okay, thank you. This is a very interesting item here. I'd like to thank everybody for their thoughtful comments. I think that now is a really good time for the haves to be considering the have-nots, and there's a lot of good stuff that Amy said about that 43% of Latinos have zero income right now, and so I would like to see some sort of provision in this plan so that the people who do serve the economy here in Sonoma get that help, because the burden of 2-3 months back rent at the end in a lump sum payment is just going to be outrageous. And so I think that this is an excellent plan, and just have to leave it to your all's judgment to figure out how to make it work, and hopefully to instruct Fish to make sure that the money goes to the people who really need it the most here. And so if you want to find out the demographics of people who work in the economy, what sort of jobs they have, you can look at the State of Working Sonoma 2018 by Jesus Guzman and the Economic Development Board report that's associated with Hidden in Plain Sight. See who is really hurting the most here. And so I would hope that the council would want to market and make sure that this benefits people from Sonoma, because this is Sonoma money, but also allocate, maybe at least half of it for the people who don't live in Sonoma, but who do serve Sonoma. Because I don't know if it would come on a first serve basis, or whether you would say, we want half of this money to go to, the 43% of these people who don't have any income right now. So I think this is a really good idea, and the NOFA sounds like a great idea. It's kind of maybe gambling, but I'm glad that you can shuffle some shells here and move money around so it's not an all or nothing gamble here, and you can do everything, it sounds like. So thanks for making it all possible, and go ahead and do the right thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Fred. Anyone else for public comment? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the council.
Mayor Harvey, may I just got an email from Cindy Potter from Fish, and she just says that they do have data and be happy to provide more of that to council. So that they've done 40 plus in the last 2 months from people directly from the city that are within the city of Sonoma, because they have those addresses. So passing that information on to all of you.
Mayor Harvey, I do have an email. Public comment.
Thank you, Latanya. Go ahead.
Council, thanks for taking my comment. I'm listening on YouTube. This is from Tom Conlon. I support staff's plan to modify the housing program designed to address the current rent crisis. Are criteria or other protections in place to ensure that funds aren't overly concentrated in certain landlords? That's it.
All right. Any other public comment? Seeing none, I'll go ahead and bring it back to council. Do we have an answer on the landlord question? I mean, I think it's just kind of whether or not somebody can afford to pay rent, not, I mean,
I just personally don't have a problem. I mean, if somebody owns a larger rental property with a lot of low-income people,
yeah,
I want to make sure that people are housed, and the landlord
Yeah.
getting 50% of their rent doesn't offend me in any way.
yeah. Yeah, I think there are going to be some larger landlords who are going to get 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 of these payments, but the point is to keep people in their homes. And that's one of the biggest risks. And right now we've got, I looked at the stats today, it's about 53% or 50% or less of Californians who've applied for unemployment have received it. So there's a huge need there. And then our undocumented population is receiving no federal or state benefits. I mean, Newsom allocated some money now for undocumented immigrants, but at the moment, these programs have been so convoluted, so difficult for people to actually get access to, that I think it's important that we help people. We have comments from council. Go ahead, Rachel and then David.
Thanks. Well, it sounds like I might have the unpopular opinion here, but I think about the last several years and the disasters we've had, which have each been somewhat unprecedented in and of themselves. The 2017 fires, and then the 2019 fires, and the power and then this spring. I mean, we've certainly never had anything like this, and then we have the fall to look forward to. But a consistent reality through each of these years has been the fact that we are in a housing crisis. We remain in a housing crisis. And it has been a challenging and complicated issue. And, I've, over the last 6 years now, I've heard the council talk a lot about, supporting affordable housing, wanting to build more affordable housing. And it took us a long time to actually start making tangible steps to improve this issue. One of those was investing in a consultant last year in town halls with the hope that we could come together on some consensus on how we could actually move forward to produce more affordable housing. And a related component of that was the trust fund. We've talked about it for years, and then it finally happened. And we knew when we established it, it was going to be kind of a long-term project. It would take a lot of time for it to get enough money to really do something with. And, in light of the recent groundbreaking of the Altamira project, which was in the works for more than 10 years, it's like these things take a very long time, and it takes a lot of persistence and patience to keep pushing forward so that you can produce affordable housing that's stable in no matter the disasters happen, it is the most stable housing that low-income families and workers can have. So, despite the fact that we've never seen anything like the pandemic that we've had now, I think it's really important that we continue to walk and chew gum at the same time and keep our sights on what our persistent long-term goals and issues are, while also figuring out ways to address the things that are in front of us. And right now, there is a huge need. There's a huge need for food assistance. There's a huge need for rental assistance, and it's probably going to continue for months, and we won't even know what the fallout is going to be until, a year or two from now. So I certainly support the city getting involved and helping fund a rental assistance program. I don't think it's a good idea to amend the Housing Trust Fund. I think the Housing Trust Fund needs to be our long-term plan. And we knew when we started it that there would be opportunities for us to leverage that money to get more money. And so we've heard this week from a new program from California, from the state. And that's not a surprise. California has made affordable housing a priority. I don't think that's the last one of these programs we're going to see. I had calls with both of our congressional representatives in Sonoma County, Congressman Huffman and Congressman Thompson, and a big topic of conversation is infrastructure stimulus projects. And there's going to be, after all these first waves of funding, new waves that are specifically related to infrastructure funding, and affordable housing is also a part of that. So agencies that have planned, they've been setting aside money for it. There's going to be opportunities to do things that we could never fully afford by ourselves. But it's really important for us to stay committed to having something long-term, like a housing trust fund. So I think that we should look at the other sources of funding that we have. This SAHA money, I think, would be a great reallocation for this. And start with 50 of that, and when we start nearing the end of that funds, we can come back and look at it and see what else there is. We've set aside $100,000 for the resiliency fund. I'm on the recovery subcommittee for businesses, and we are talking about doing something on the pod that's going to require infrastructure. We haven't talked about how it's funded, but that's going to be something else that we need to talk about. So I think that we need to sort of consider this environment that we're in and compare it to our long-term goals and getting through this crisis that we're in. I think that we should use funding sources that are more appropriate for short-term projects. So I would support supporting a program, but I would not support amending the housing trust.
Councilmember Harrington.
I think it's really easy to say that you support basically working class and poor people and do little about it. And so to restate history, there wasn't a long-term discussion about a housing trust fund. I agendized that. And also I agendized raising the minimum wage. These are concrete programs to move forward, not just talking about it and posting on Facebook and saying you like it, but actually putting money there. And if you care about homeless people and more people not becoming homeless, and the working poor, and the 43% of Latinos who break their backs to make this town what it is, I think you should really consider that keeping people housed, which was discussed in the housing workshops. Keeping people housed is a huge part of affordable housing, little a affordable housing. There was a whole topic about it at that workshop. So I think voting against something for political reasons, because you don't want to be on the side of the person who voted for it, is, which I think this is, doesn't make a lot of sense. And I think showing
I'm not really sure what you're talking about, but I have explained my position on the subject, and I'm interested to hear what the rest of our colleagues feel about it.
It's actually my turn to talk. So voting against something, voting for something that everybody doesn't vote for, so you can say that you support progressive policies, is not what this is about. It's about actually keeping real human beings in their home with a Sonoma-based program that is proven to work. So I'm sorry you can't support that, and I hope that everyone else can.
Do we have another comment?
Yeah, sure.
David, I think, wanted to comment as well.
Oh, sorry, David. Pardon.
Either way. David, you're muted. So let's go with Madeline since she's unmuted now, and then.
Because I'm behaving. Okay, so, you know, I think our housing trust fund was just symbolic, because we couldn't build anything with $250,000. It was really symbolic. But I also thought we could be innovative, as I think Rachel is suggesting. We may have partnered with somebody from Petaluma or Cotati to put money together. Maybe we couldn't put it all together here, but maybe we could house some people that from here in Cotati or something. Maybe that's a far out dream. But I understand what you're saying, because, you know, sometimes, you know, you have to have a placeholder for something. And I hope, I support this, and I hope we don't go through all of that housing trust fund, because hopefully with what David has just mentioned, there's got something, you know, there might be something in the works for a small city like us that suffers from being beautiful. They think we have no problems. So I can't foresee anyone giving money to our city, but I hope it's not true. But I understand what Rachel's offering. You know, sometimes we have to save a place for something, but I never thought that money was really going to do anything for us. But I thought we could have partnered with someone down the line. I do, you know what? I do support this because I think it's important, and I do support the maybe SAHA money first, the $75,000. But I like to thank you for the committee for suggesting $50,000 increments. But I don't know what that means in a limit. I mean, we only have so much, but.
Councilmember Cook.
Yeah, I definitely support the ad hoc or the good work that Mayor Harvey and Councilmember Harrington have done on this. Sorry if I'm speaking slow. I've been up since 3:30 this morning. We had a stolen U-Haul, so I got California Highway Patrol called me this morning. Been up since. And one thing is, I do respect fish, and I love this program. I think this is what the Housing Fund is part of. There's other parts of it. But one comment that I always have is we always talk about the city of Sonoma, and we need to look at the sphere of influence out there. A lot of the money that comes into Sonoma, we always have to be reminded that that is coming from the Springs area, from sales tax and different things that they do and out there in the Springs area. And and they work here. So I do like that criteria, but leaving it up to fish is the way that I would like to do it, because they're the professionals on this. And I think doing the incremental aspect of it is great, because we can kind of monitor it. And hopefully this is something that, Mr. Storer can get some grant money coming this way, and it'll really help, because we are going to be coming out of this pandemic with some real issues. And we need to make sure that we're one step ahead of this. And I think that this is probably something that will be looked back on in a couple of years as one of the greatest things this council has done. I support it.
Vice Mayor Hundley, did you have additional comments? No? Okay. Yeah, I think that we should absolutely be supporting this. I think that money that is set aside for affordable housing, the first base is like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Keeping people in their homes is the best thing that we can possibly do. And when they are at severe risk of that, and at the moment they are at severe risk of that, when you go and talk, I work at the food bank. I go there every Monday and Friday to hand out food. And the amount of people that are showing up there accepting food, the amount of people that I see with tears in their eyes that have never accepted food before, the pain out there is extremely real. And people are feeling tons of pressure. They are not receiving unemployment benefits. There are 50% of California has not received the unemployment benefits. Those people are in our communities. I hear from them directly. They've applied over a month ago. They have received absolutely nothing. There are Latinos in our community who will receive nothing for the entirety of this crisis. And this will not only be during the shelter in place. There's an economic crisis that will follow this, that will continue to be bad. These shops and stores are going to open up to very low demand. And it's an extremely huge problem. We will see homelessness spike if we are not able to protect these people. And rather than having individuals in our community wake up after 3 months of being eviction protected to have 3 months of back rent to pay, I'd much rather give them a tool where they can negotiate with their landlords, put a tool in their hand and say, I can get this rental assistance program and I can make my rent, or I can make a portion of my rent, and let's allow that to float me through the next few months. I understand the goals and desires of having a long-term program. I tried to identify land in the city of Sonoma that we could tell the state, hey, they were looking for surplus land. I tried to identify a plot that was here that's part of state parks. Nobody supported me on that. I also think that with what we've got from HCD that David Storer has talked about, I think that's really important to look at. And there's a possibility that we could, okay, so let's not say the entirety of the fund. So in perpetuity, no matter how much money we put in there, we could say 160,000, what exists in the fund now can be used for the rental assistance program. That gives us 3 months of rental assistance. And then if it's a minimum of 500,000, we could put 500,000 in, try to get matching funds for that. And then we would be able to do both. We can stop the bleeding, and it's not just a capillary here. This is an arterial bleed that's happening in our community. And we can protect people, keep them in their homes today, and still continue on with our Affordable Housing Trust Fund as it goes on. Because yes, we need to build affordable housing, and I will continue to support that, have supported that. And yes, we also need to make sure that we can keep families who are in massive distress, whatever the city can do to them, can do for them, we must do for them. And I think this is the best thing that we could possibly do here, is to try to keep families in their homes. And I absolutely support that.
What kind of motion do we need, Kathy?
So I need you to approve the resolution, but I would, based on council conversation, what I'm hearing is to maybe add one item. So the resolution amends the guidelines And then the resolution authorizes me to execute an agreement with Fish to use up to the full current balance, which is the 166. And then it says it'll be provided in separate allocations as need arises, provided the funding can continue to Fish 90 days after the emergency declaration is lifted. And again, I talked about the priority that I think Councilmember Harrington, in terms of who, articulated a couple times. I might, if council wants, you could add one other item just that would capture this 50,000 idea, which would be the city manager will report back with each 50,000 contribution for an update and further direction regarding remaining funding distribution, so that you could do it. It's set in a reso, and then that could be. We'd have to talk to the city attorney, but my thought this could almost be done maybe even under a city manager report versus a full, because you've given the direction versus a full staff report that would have to come back. So that would be my recommendation, and just it's a motion on the resolution.
Where is the 75,000?
The 75,000 is not, if you want this, the 75,000 sits separately at this point because it's not part of the Housing Trust Fund. And then I would argue the 75 was not agendized in a way that you could potentially, I'd have to ask the city attorney on that if you want to use that money, if that could go. So this would be within the 166,000 that's currently within the fund, but adding within the resolution that I would come back with each 50,000 allocation, give you an update, provide an update about how many folks were helped and information, and then again, determine if council still wants to consider it, but you would have made the broad direction to use the full amount. To
make a motion to approve that resolution as amended, stated by the city manager.
Second.
All right, Rebecca Bonner. Rebecca, roll call vote. I can't hear you.
You're on mute.
Oh, I'm so glad somebody else is in trouble.
Vice Mayor Hundley,
No.
Councilmember Harrington,
Aye.
Councilmember Agrimonti,
Aye.
Councilmember Cook,
Aye.
Mayor Harvey.
Yes.
Thank you. The motion carries 4-1.
Great. Councilmember reports and comments. None? City manager comments and announcements?
Just one. Just a reminder that the farmers only portion of our Tuesday market, the first one will happen in the Little League parking lot off of First Street East tomorrow, 3 o'clock. And then the city staff we are busy with continuing to respond to whether it's park orders or shelter in place or other items. So there's definitely a lot of work still responding to the pandemic, and then also a lot of work preparing budget information. So, and then working also kind of the recovery and reopening. So that's the extent of my report. Thank you.
And sorry, Mr. Mayor, could I jump in? I received an email from Mark Bodenhammer.
Jump in.
Pardon? And I'll send it to Kathy Capriola, and she can forward it to us, discussing the survey and what they're finding from takeout. So I'll just send it to Kathy.
Oh, that would be great.
And I'll distribute it. Thank you.
Great. All right, Jeff Walter.
Mr. Mayor, no comments tonight.
That was pretty huge. Thank you. Sounds good. All right, well, I'll go ahead and call this meeting adjourned. Thank you very much for participating. Have a great night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rebecca.